What is up, ladies and gents? It is your friendly neighborhood BJJ podcast for Rafa Sparza, coming to you with another great installment of the Bullpen, a joint venture between Inside BJJ and the Grappling Hour. I hope you're having a good day. I hope you've recovered from all of the overdosing you've done. Jiu-Jitsu, other stuff I don't know what you do. But Jiu-Jitsu, lots of overdosing, lots of Jiu-Jitsu overdosing, lots of events. There was 4 straight days of events. Compliments our friends who started with the original flagship of EBI and now have expanded to Medusa and Combat Jiu-Jitsu, and yes, even Combat Jiu-Jitsu Mexico, which only begs the question, how much more Jiu-Jitsu can you add? I asked that to our longtime friend and one correspondent who is not overdosed to my knowledge, one Tim Freeman. Tim, how are you doing, sir?
I didn't know you could overdose on jiu-jitsu, but apparently you can, and it feels like a good overdose. Like the therapeutic window is really wide for jiu-jitsu, and you could just keep packing it in over and over and over. But seriously, you need a day just to decompress after watching so many slaps, so many taps, so many chokes. What a great 4 days of jiu-jitsu. I gotta tip my hat to Eddie Bravo and gang. When this first got announced, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit skeptical. Like, man, how are they going to actually pull this off? Like, this is going to be wild. And they pulled it off very well. Great events, great win for jiu-jitsu. I'm stoked to be here, Raf.
Happy to have you. What was your initial response when you saw Eddie had appeared to collapse on the beach?
Yeah, I saw that. The reel that I saw was just briefly him being taken out, and I looked at it again, and I'm like, is that Eddie? Oh, that is Eddie. Did he just find out that the earth is not flat, and he just straight up passed out, and they had to cart him out? Or did he just have such a great time that that's it? He's exhausted. He's done. Those are the first thoughts that gone through my mind. I imagine, though, he was pretty content laying on that stretcher being carted around on the beach. If you're going to be on a stretcher, the beach is probably the best place to be on it.
I have to say, and this is perhaps my knowledge as a pro wrestling fan, it did feel like we were once again borrowing from the page of professional wrestling, because the night before, Cody Rhodes was shockingly hit with a pile driver by Kevin Owens, which is banned by the WWE, and had to be carted out. Kids wondered if he was safe. People wondered if he was okay. It was rough. People cried. And then what did we do the next day? Eddie Bravo collapses. And the first image I see is of everybody surrounding him and them saying, like, back up, back up. And I go, all right, what's the bit? So I will tell you, I am glad he is okay. I'm glad the bit worked. And I see a note here from Tiago Rizzi that says, no microdosing in jiu-jitsu any longer. We should all go for overdosing. Thank you for that comment. I should point this out, though. They did say that they're adding one element at the end of last night's show. Did you hear what they're going to add to next year's Jiu-Jitsu Overdose?
No, I didn't catch that. What I'm curious to hear, though, it's like, what can they add? If it's coming from this gang, it's got to be an interesting twist.
So at the very end of it, Eddie said, next year, we're going to add a rave. Now, listen, as it is, they inverted the structure and had an open mat late at night. You know, that's kind of cool, but I don't know that jiu-jitsu is what I want to do at the end of the day. Nonetheless, you take the training where you can get it, especially on those incredibly busy weeks. So I'm glad our friends got to have a little bit of playtime. But when he mentioned Jiu-Jitsu Overdose is going to have a rave next year, I thought to myself, all I could really imagine was the rave from Matrix and how unnecessary it is. And I go, it'll probably be something like that.
Yeah, when I think rave, I think of the rave. Listen, nothing good happens at a rave. Woodstock 99 also had a rave at the end of each night, and we saw what kind of train wreck that was. So if we're going to be raving with jiu-jitsu guys, like, what if somebody's out there kung fu dancing? Like, it could get scrappy real quick.
You know, you bring up a good point. And it's that we cannot be trusted in this sport. Having said
Agreed.
that, I would love for you to go ahead and take the lead, sir, and tell us your interpretations of what happened. We did crown a new combat jiu-jitsu world's winner. And when I say new, it was definitely somebody who may not have been on a lot of people's bingo cards, but nonetheless should have been, considering what an excellent performance he had. So, Tim, what was your interpretation of what happened yesterday, sir?
So, and I'm honest, I'm going to tell the truth. My first word thought for Matt Mash was Spicoli. This is what I crowned this kid as. And he came out in his first match and looked fantastic against Randy Baker. Had great, and Randy Baker's got good wrestling too, but Mash's wrestling to jiu-jitsu ratio, I think, is tuned just right for combat jiu-jitsu. I could see him maybe getting in a little trouble with pure jiu-jitsu without the strikes, but especially in the overtime positions. But when you throw those strikes in with his style of grappling, man, it's almost the perfect mix. He looked great in the beginning, and I realized at that point that I had made a fatal error in my calculation. Overall, I thought it was a good event. A few guys really stood out. I thought Ben Eddy looked really fantastic. He walked away with 3 submissions, made it to the opponent. I believe it was Barzola. I think that's how you say his. And then his next match, he had to fight Nate Orchard, who is the creator of the Dead Orchard. And he walked away with a Scottish twister. I don't know the difference between a Scottish twister and an English twister, but I'm assuming there's some kind of rub in there somewhere. But Ben Eddy looked really fantastic. Other things that jumped out to me, one was this. Our guy that we had, Christos Papadelos going up against Diallo, and he beat Diallo. He won in overtime. He got his hand raised, but could not continue due to the damage that he took during the match. The striking looked so much cleaner, so much crisper. It felt and it looked like MMA to me on the ground. I mean, these guys were landing serious, serious palm strikes, not just to the face, to the body, to the thigh. I saw dudes hitting each other in the kidneys and the liver. It's pretty dangerous out there now, and you can't discount that in combat jiu-jitsu. You have to take that into account. You can't just train jiu-jitsu and then be like, yeah, I'm going to throw some slaps, it'll all be good. I don't think so, man. I think those days are over. So we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick in the guys that are coming into combat jiu-jitsu. We crowned some new stars. We got some new guys out there. So, man, overall, I thought last night was a 10 out of 10.
Thank you for that, Tim. Just to kind of go back and correct the record, I think you were saying something to the effect of you were giving that word a Spicoli for Matt. And if you look at the photo, it's not really your fault. Like, he did look like a Spicoli. Also, the kid's only, 19 years old? And he was already a CJJ vet. So he had done this before, but it was incredible to see him because let's go through the order of operations here. You mentioned Nate Orchard. Nate looked like he might have also had a run back to that championship. And he was close. He got stopped by Ben Eddy in overtime. But for that match with him out, he looked like the Nate Orchard we all know and feared for many years in competition. So shout out to him. I thought that was pretty impressive. And if we're talking about stars, we should also bring up JJ, who, from Jay Pages, made a huge name for himself in defeating Keith Kokorian. Now, Keith, obviously a longtime friend of our show, a competitor, no stranger to like high-profile matches. You know, it was kind of surprising to see him go out. I looked at the video again, and I thought it looked like Keith was tapping, or at the very least trying to before going out, because he did kind of do that Brazilian one-hand tap, and then maybe a few seconds later they stopped the match, and I'm glad that they did. But not to take anything away from JJ, I just saw what he was doing. He went out there, he got his finish, and even though he didn't advance, he probably created the most viral moment, I think, from that entire tournament experience.
Yeah, you're probably right. And if I'm not wrong, JJ's like 17 or 18 years old also.
Yeah.
This is the rise of the kids. We're starting to see these kids who have been training in jiu-jitsu and in wrestling. Some of them have been striking since they were young, and now they're coming up through combat jiu-jitsu. And these guys are studs. Like, if you're a 30-year-old man, it's real easy to think I'm gonna put hands on this dude, and he's never felt my old man strength. If you can catch him, and JJ was aggressive, man. He had good aggressive jiu-jitsu. He got in Daramima's face. He was super, super on it against Keith Krikoran, who Keith is not. I mean, I've had the pleasure of rolling with Keith a long time ago when he was a purple belt. He was super hard to deal with then. I can't imagine where he's at now with the experience that he's picked up. So that's a big feather in JJ Bauer's cap. Obviously, we love Keith. It sucked to see Keith go out like that. But yeah, I'd agree with you. I think out of all the surprises, that is probably the biggest surprise and the biggest viral moment.
And I think you were asking the difference between an English and a Scottish twister.
Yeah.
It's just alcohol. The amount that you're drinking in it. That's it. One purports that they can hold their liquor better, but I won't get into that. I would tell you, those two impressed me. Obviously, we had some interesting moments all the way throughout. I think there was a number of finishes in that first round, and you ended up seeing people like Max Hansen do well. And not to say Nathan Orchard making short work of our good friend Javier Garcia as well. Like, it started very intense for that tournament.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there were 7 submissions in the first 8 matches. The only one that went to decision was Christos Papadelos. And I mean, that was a banger of a match too. That wasn't like a boring decision. That was a I don't want to go get chips from the kitchen submission or decision because I want to see what's going to happen here. Like, this is too crazy.
The other thing to note is with Christos, I noticed something was off when they were doing the hand raise. And it really kind of stuck out to me because I saw he was continuously putting his hands on his knees, and he didn't look like the Christos that we know. He's obviously an excellent competitor, but then when they showed the video, he seemed to suggest like they were hitting him in the back of the head. And you see some of those strikes, and even if they were illegal or legal, it's very difficult in the moment to say like, that's a super legal one because you're just right in the thick of it. So that kid definitely toughed it out. And I sent him a message and he goes, "Don't worry, guys, I'm fine." And I was like, "Are you really though, dude? Like, you should not be on your phone today if you took any concussion symptoms." He's like, "I'm fine." So
Yeah, no
from
screens.
what I know, he's okay.
You mentioned the slaps to the back of the head. The other thing that I saw was I saw a lot of downward slaps where guys were clipping their opponent with the elbow and with their forearm. Quite a few of
Yeah.
those, which, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. I'm a big proponent of that. But at the same time, that's a little dicey. I wonder if maybe certain strikes become like, hey, you can't strike in that format anymore. I hope they don't do that. And the up kicks were like, man, the up push kicks were just right on the line of like, what is a kick and what's a push off? We're right there.
We are still figuring that part out. But nonetheless, those were some of the big moments that kind of came to me. And yeah, so I definitely wanted to give a shout out to Christos. I'm glad he's okay. Shout out Keith. Hope you're okay. JJ, excellent performance. Nathan Orchard still surprising us after all these years. Like, if you're going to grow old, you're growing old at his pace because he's still in the thick of it. And this is a dude who we've talked to multiple times on my show. And he's always been like, I don't know how much more time I got left in me. That was like 4 or 5 years ago. So clearly it is not stuck.
Yeah, he's a real ninja. He really is. Like, if you had to fight anybody in a street fight, you could bring any weapon and do any technique. He would be the last guy on that list that I would want to mess with. He's just too tricky. He's too clever, and he's dangerous.
Yeah. I'll ask this to you, Tim. Who or what match, I should say, impressed you the most? Like, what was the best match at yesterday's CJJ Worlds?
The one that impressed me the most, I don't know if this is going to be everybody's best match, was seeing Matt Mash defeat Max Hansen with an armbar in overtime, because you don't typically see somebody outwork Max Hansen. He's a dog. And I'm not saying he phoned it in because he did it, but by the end of the regulation time, he was visibly tired. He was like, "Damn, I got to get down on the ground now and let this monster kid on my back and figure out a way to get off of him." And he fought off that first OT round, but when it came to the arm lock, it was no bueno for Max Hansen. But that match stood out to me as, kind of like a big statement from Matt Mash. Like, dude, I'm here. Because in a lot of people's minds, Hansen was the number one seed. Like, I thought Hansen would at least get to the semifinals, and I wouldn't have been surprised if he would have. I thought he's going to fight Nate Orchard in the finals, to be honest with you. But Matt Mash made a decent day out of him, and so that one stood out to me the most, Raph.
Very nice, sir. So I wanted to bring it back to this part of the conversation, which is, Christos got me thinking. I feel like he's somebody I would have slotted to regular EBI, but I was going to ask you, was there anybody from EBI, or maybe perhaps you saw throughout the week, that you would have slotted instead to CJJ?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think I would have really liked to see Jet Thompson in CJJ. I just like to see what his game is like if he can start throwing hands because he's rowdy. He likes to get after it. I think he has an untapped mean streak in him that we quite haven't seen yet. And I'd like to see that come out. I would like to nourish that. I would like to see it flourish. And I'd like to see that kid put some hands on. He already loves to muffle people. All he's got to do is raise the hand up a couple more feet and just muffle real hard when he comes down. I think he's a great candidate to do some combat jiu-jitsu.
It's weird, and I don't know how well this one will be received, but it occurred to me that one person that could have been slotted over would have been Ernesto from EBI to combat jiu-jitsu, because from what I've seen, from what he does, I don't know if he has hands or not. I just know he's pretty aggressive, and I felt like at EBI, he wasn't going to get past Wojcik that time. But it made me think, if this was under combat jiu-jitsu rules, who knows? So he was one of the people that I actually reversed. And then I thought, as I looked at like this poster one more time, somebody who I would have loved to have sent from CJJ card. I mean, honestly, it probably would have been Max. Max is super talented as somebody who doesn't mind slapping people and, definitely lives that life. There was a part of me that was like, I wonder how Max would have done if he had been switched over. So those were two things I was playing with. We did get a comment here. It says, the thing I'm glad about is that 10th Planet went from outcast to legit to a serious threat to the mainstream jiu-jitsu mentality. Now this threat became a beam of freshness to the industry. I mean, sure, it's very weird to me. It's sort of like when the right complains about the mainstream media, or like 10th Planet goes, "Oh, we're not mainstream." And I was like, "No, you are.
Yeah.
It's the popular one. You guys are the one that set the standard." But I think because they spent so many years on the peripheral, the outside, if you would, they kind of still feel like scrappy underdogs. But they still have shown, and I think this weekend with Jiu Jitsu Overdose, they're still kind of the standard bearer of trying to create the entertainment aspect. So it's no surprise that the brainchild of Eddie eventually gave way to like a PGF, which is such a showcase that we were talking off air about this. And I do feel like these events all have certain things going for it. I do feel like the PGF has the momentum with the short rounds. And I like the fact that for EBI and combat jiu-jitsu, I'm not exactly sure on these, but I want to say that their first rounds were actually shorter than their later rounds. So like their preliminary rounds, I thought were just 8 minutes. And then as they got more to the semis, they were 10. I think that's a good step. Maybe it incites some future movement. But one thing we've seen for PGF is even if it's a boring match, you can do 6 minutes. Like you'll live.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you are right about that. The matches did get longer at EBI as they move through the brackets. And, there were some times when I'm like, if this was PGF, the flag would have been thrown for sure right now. And if you're going to have a 6-minute match, then it's got to be as close to a sprint. It's like running the 400. You got to get after it, right? And you got to support that. But yeah, Eddie's an innovator, and it is interesting because the first combat jujitsu didn't think people were trying to figure it out. And we've seen the striking develop, we've seen the grappling develop, and we play jujitsu without having this idea of like, hey, you can get hit in the face right here, and it could radically alter your opinion of the things you should be doing right now. And we're really starting to see that. It's restoring the power back to the rightful positions in jujitsu, which is pretty neat to watch because most of us started with that concept in mind when we actually started jujitsu.
Tim, I want to expand it to the rest of the week. What, if anything, were like some of the matches or individuals that caught your attention from the entire week? Because obviously, I know you gave a shout out to Jet. We love Jet. I always love seeing his post afterwards because you can tell he has the I didn't win, I don't care mentality, which will serve him well. But it's always funny because I feel like the rest of us are in the comment section being like, dude, you're still really good. Like, you're pretty dope.
Yeah.
And I know that
None of
when
us
you're a
feel
good
sorry for him.
competitor, you don't care, but the rest of us can't not say anything. Like, it's too impossible for us not to categorize the achievements of what he does. But nonetheless, I wanted to ask if you had anybody else who impressed you over the past 4 days.
Well, the first night with the essentially the qualifying combat jiu-jitsu matches, I thought it was a really unique, clever twist to say, hey, if you win, then you get a berth to a position 2 days later, either in EBI or in combat jujitsu. So that wrinkle was kind of cool because we don't typically see it play out like that. So I thought that was entertaining. I thought that was a nice twist. When it came to Medusa, a few things happened. One is surprisingly, Kaya Jackson lost, which was kind of a shock to me. I felt like she would be one of the front runners. Valerie Wong showed up big time, right? And seriously made a name for herself, put her stamp on that division. So I thought that was a pretty big bump up for Medusa. And then obviously EBI, seeing Alan Sanchez, who's a great dude, someone I know personally, someone I've had the pleasure of training with a handful of times. It was just a real pleasure to see him go out there and be so focused and implement his game. And probably, out of all the 10th Planet guys, and this is no disrespect to any of the 10th Planet homies, I love all those guys. Alan really displays like the pure 10th Planet stuff that Eddie shows. He's putting it out there in the way that Eddie wants people to do it. Alan's doing it. He is the perfect example of that. So I was stoked to see him go out there. I did want to see Jet Thompson move further in the bracket, but Sanchez just looked great. Kevin Buring, I thought, looked fantastic. He's had a big bump up in his game as well. He's really making a name for himself. All those guys out of 10th Planet Atlanta are seriously starting to make some noise, and that was pretty cool to watch as well. And then obviously when we get to combat jiu-jitsu, just seeing I had not seen Matt Mash before. I know he made it to the finals in a previous combat jiu-jitsu. Maybe I watched it and it just didn't register. The that he had of like jiu-jitsu, it just felt dialed in at the perfect. He really set the standard for like, if you're gonna be competitive in combat jiu-jitsu, you need a game that's kind of like this or close to it. It can't be all jiu-jitsu. We know that it's super hard to go out there with all jiu-jitsu. And it can't be all strikes, but it's got to be like the right kind of twist on it. And I felt like we saw that. The other thing is we saw some stars born. We saw some names pop off, and these guys are launching their careers into the jiu-jitsu stratosphere, which is a great thing to watch. Namely because guys like us have been watching EBI and combat jiu-jitsu for 12 years, 15 years now, and it's pretty cool to see that it's still around, it's still super relevant, and it's still producing big time stars.
Thank you for that. I'll add another one to that list, which is going to be, if you really think about it, we somehow have not really gotten to name drop this person, but it should go without saying, shout out Chris Wojcik. Chris Wojcik still looked incredible. I mean, if you think about this, runner-up at PGF, runner-up at Combat Jiu-Jitsu, EBI. You look at those two different performances, and you're thinking to yourself, like, man, this dude, he may joke that he, like B-Team, keeps getting silver, but the performances are incredible each time. And I think it's hard to overstate just how close he is. He's like really, not just within that conversation, I think we already believe him to be good. It's just, something is right around the corner for him. And I don't know what it is, but shout out to him. You mentioned Val. She did awesome. Aislinn O'Connell, of course, repeating her success. Incredibly well done. You did touch upon Kevin Beering, but I do want to make sure this does get the love it should. We've sang the praises of Jet Thompson for a long time, but Kevin Beering actually stopped Jet Thompson. Not for nothing. It's pretty good, especially when people are seeing the enthusiasm of one young man. They forget, well, Kevin's kind of young too, and still very good at jiu-jitsu. So I definitely wanted to make sure that those people got some acknowledgement. And then even just looking back at this, like Nathan had, listen, dude, it's cool that these guys come, make statements. Nick Ronan didn't even make it past that first round, and he is a beast. For Nathan to jump in and do what he did, awesome. Very proud of that. Ernesto got his moment to shine. I thought that was cool. Davis Asari, right time, right place. All things considered, maybe something in the future for him as well. But I was definitely impressed by those people. And shout out to the winner of that first day, which is going to be Carlos Calvo, who was the winner of one of the first day tournaments. He had a tough first round because, as one does, against Alan Sanchez. But it always makes you wonder, like, he had a really aggressive, rough style that I said, if you put him anywhere else, or in combat jiu-jitsu specifically, I wonder what he would have been able to do. But he was in regular EBI. And part of me was thinking he would be one of those people I would consider for the CJJ Worlds element when they go back to that weight. So them, shout out, of course, Officer Grimy, for getting a win in overtime just without doing the whole, weird ass, like ass in the air reverse.
Yeah.
Weird?
I saw that.
He's leading the charge on it, and it's one of those things where I go, brother, that's your hill to die on. I don't know that I can get involved in it. I'm not against you. It's just, I don't have the time to make that argument for you. I guess, in theory, I don't care. But I also feel like it's not just that. It should be like a jiu-jitsu overtime. They did that as a tournament once. If you do a jiu-jitsu overtime tournament, I think you have to let them do that. But if we're just doing jiu-jitsu overtime and we got somewhere to be, part of me is like, brother, come on. You either got advanced warning for this or we're not doing it. So
yeah,
that's the one I've got for those folks. And like I said, all around, great performances from everybody. Super proud of for doing as good as they did, considering we just did Subversive back-to-back for essentially 3 days for press conference and then 2 days of action. And that was tiring. I can only imagine what it was like 4 days plus seminars, plus the comedy shows. It definitely is something unique in our jiu-jitsu landscape. So even when you think EBI can't show you new things, they still do. And I do want to bring this up because it is a very interesting thing that I read here today. We'll probably talk a little bit more about this on the upcoming edition of the Bullpen on Friday. But I thought this was topical, so we might as well address it now. Isn't it funny that Gordon put out a long video talking about his steroid use? Have you seen this, Tim?
No, this is news to me. I haven't been super on the gram today.
So essentially what he did was he put out this video. I caught I want to say Jits Magazine. They did like a reshare of a quick recap of what the video was about because I don't really want to watch it. But it's basically him saying why he did steroids and what did he do and when did he do it. And wouldn't you know it, he said he started really after proving he could beat people off steroids. But it's literally around the time when I jokingly asked him how many steroids he was on. So I want to tell you guys, not to toot my own horn, but my instincts as an interviewer, consistent. So just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And a few of us, yourself included, we remember Skinny Gordon, and then I remember like, whoa, Barry Bonds Gordon. Like you're on the clear and the cream, brother. Nice work.
I mean, if you look at my head, it's a pretty big head. And when his head was smaller than mine and then somehow became magically larger than mine, you do have questions. And I was saying it to him jokingly, but up until now, that's the most he's gone on comment about it because he's mostly just said steroids are legal, which is a byproduct of we don't have the means to test or we just don't care. So as a result, therefore, it is legal, which is a weird gray area, but I think it's not to be surprising that that would be the take. The only thing that's interesting about the way they framed it was the camera shot made sure to get his whole library filled with championships and stuff behind him to demonstrate, oh, hello, I have taken all of the steroids. So it's an intriguing thing. It's almost like Lance Armstrong putting the titles behind him and then saying, like, what did you want to ask me about? I'm so sorry. I know they're taking these away, but what do we want to talk about? So, and it says, yeah, I remember him starting to beef up when him and Tonin against at EBI. Yes, and I think that was one of the times I did talk to him. And it says, Yuri, not him. Sure, why autocorrect did that? I mean, your autocorrect is trying to fact check you, sir. So that's something you need to get your house in order. I would tell you this, though, Tim. As a whole, I was impressed greatly from Jiu Jitsu Overdose. Is there anything you would like to see from next year's installment that's not a rave?
Man, that's a great question. I feel like I don't necessarily want them to tinker with the rule set too much. I'd like to see them use the same rule set, similar caliber athletes, right? I think it's cool that they bring in some MMA guys because we get a chance to see these guys in this format that we might not be able to see like in a straight EBI. But moving forward, like I think it would be cool to see some kind of collaboration with PGF or the other promotions, and maybe there's a way to get birthed into another promotion by winning combat jiu-jitsu, or by winning at the other promotion, you get a spot into combat jiu-jitsu. I think that would be kind of a cool thing to see. Just like some cooperation between the promotions.
And I don't think we're far off from it because we're already at a place where PGF is doing their collaborations with Enigma. And I feel like now they're letting Enigma host their prelims or their qualifiers. So it could be down the line. Maybe PGF gives you a supplied winner. The weird part about this was people who didn't even win PGF were somehow in the fold. So we may need to figure out how we do these talent pools because it felt like if you were on PGF, you had a shot. You had a 50-50 shot of being chosen for an EBI participation. So it may already be there. There's one thing I would like to say. And this is something I thought about long and hard. And I know I still might be in the minority here, but hear me out. Some importance. Guys, I don't know if I pass metrics are. I would love to know them. I would love to know the numbers. I'm just willing to bet from the talent pool that you had for EBI, it should be the Sunday event. I think you switch EBI and combat jiu-jitsu. Now, perhaps you do it because you think it's the most exciting one. I thought EBI Original Crispy was just fine enough. Now, yesterday's combat jiu-jitsu was good. There were some good narratives that happened. I'm just at the place where I feel like we should be elevating EBI to its legendary status. We were so stoked to have it return. Maybe it doesn't do the numbers, but I don't think it's far off. And I would love to see somebody show me the numbers that say more people tune into combat jiu-jitsu because I don't have that information. And as a result of it, I feel like it's a attempt to put combat jiu-jitsu over EBI. Now, perhaps that's a Fight Pass thing, but to the people at Fight Pass or to whoever is behind these decisions, let me just implore you. You had too stacked of an EBI roster to not give it the last day showcase. And maybe you do it because you think to yourself, hey, I might want to give these guys a break if they did a qualifier for CJJ Mexico and maybe they need that extra day so that they'll be able to recover or induce the CJJ thing on the final day. I just, for whatever reason, I'm way more into ending with an EBI Classic. That's just me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think you would probably find more people would have been at their homes on a Sunday, which, by the way, traditionally the highest day for television viewing. That is statistically true. So, wow. Years, I don't know as much. I think you give it the showcase, and I think you call it a day. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I don't think that's a bad idea. I mean, Sundays for jiu-jitsu, Saturdays for fights. So Saturday night, put the fights on. Sunday, let's watch them grapple. That's how I always feel.
I mean, listen, fights are going to happen on Saturday anyways in CJJ. So you can do that. You can have somebody who might want to get a little bit of a double dip. They might watch the prelims for UFC and then stumble on this. Who knows? I just cannot help in the back of my mind keep seeing CJJ get the last day and think like, this feels right. Because to me, it does not fully feel right. So again, show me the metrics and I'll never question it. Well, that's not true. I'll probably still question it. I'll still question it each time, but I would love to see the metrics prove the science behind it because we're famously in a sport where they don't release metrics. So it's just on like, no, nobody wants to watch that. They want to watch this on Sunday and they go prove it. That's all. So that's where I'm at. Tim, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share about this week and the week that it was?
Yeah, overall, I thought it was a big win. And, they're already taking deposits for Jiu Jitsu Overdose 2 coming up. So you have the opportunity to do that. It's going to be in Puerto Vallarta, which is a great setting, great place to do it. I know it's a little tricky to get down to Mexico, but Mexico is pretty much the closest place you can pull off an event like this without having the athletic commission probably breathing down your neck the entire time. Outside of that, there is a name that I wanted to make sure we give some love to, and that's Caleb Crump. This guy is continuing to improve. He's continuing to get out there. And I liked what I saw out of him this week. And I think he's a guy to keep an eye on. He's hungry. He's determined. He's putting the work in. And I was really happy for him to see him get a chance to get out there and get after it. And I think he's going to make even more improvements. We're going to hear a lot more from him in the future.
Excellent note. Thank you for that, Tim. Why don't you tell people where they can find you on the interweb, sir?
You can find me at InsideBJJ.com, all the social media platforms, all that business. If you're out in Nashville, come see me at 10th Planet Nashville. If you're out in Stockton, please check out our sister school, 10th Planet Stockton.
And Tim, you are here uncontested. There is no Kevin. Yeah. You guys are head to head. Would you like to make an appeal why people should vote for you for the Running the Gauntlet bracket?
Normally, I wouldn't do that. I don't like to talk about people behind their back, but Kevin's not here, which shows you how much he cares about your vote. First of all, he's not even here. He's basically running a campaign from his kitchen, more or less. I'm here. I'm a man of the people. I'm a man of the jiu-jitsu community. I've been around for a long, long time, and I think it would behoove you to put a guy like me over a guy like Kevin. Kevin's got the looks. Kevin's got the personality, kind of. Kevin's got, he's grappling. He knows all these guys. He's doing all this stuff. But the reality is Kevin doesn't care about you like I care about you. I care about your jiu-jitsu. I care about your love for this sport and growing this martial art and sport. And I think it would be a kind gesture to give that love back to me, Tim Freeman from Inside BJJ. So when you go to your voting booth, remember Tim Freeman, Inside BJJ.
Well, that's about as good as it gets. Tim, I appreciate you for that, sir. I will talk to you off air here in a second, but great work as always. And thank you to everybody for tuning in. I got to tell you this. Jiu Jitsu Overdose was a blast. We are happy that we were able to check out their intensive amount of programming that they had throughout the week. And we look forward to the next installment. Hopefully next time we can actually be there. That would be fun. I mean, if we're going to be the official pre and post show, it would make sense. But nonetheless, we're happy to be involved, and we're happy that they gave us the call and the nod to go ahead and do some analysis for them. And we look forward to what's to come for that event in the future. But that's not it. There's obviously going to be more combat jiu-jitsu and EBI in the very near future. But just to tell you the things that are coming up, Grappling Hour, we got a lot of stuff coming up. We got a lot of interviews. I am conducting a whole bunch before Christmas, so keep an eye out for that. I believe my interview with Rafael Jimenez Jr. goes up on Thursday. That's going to be a blast. And then the following week, we got Jacob Howarth, who is going to be on the show, or at least you guys can see it for free. That's what it is, because it's already on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/grappling hour, you would have already seen it. But if you don't, you got to wait for it to be for free. Nonetheless, everybody, that is going to do it for us here at the Grappling Hour. Thank you so much for tuning in.